And today is the 108th Security Thought Leadership webinar. For those of you who have attended all the first 107, and I know that's most of you, you'll know that what we do in these thought leadership webinars is that we debate, we critique, we think about what's going on today. And the point of that is to enable thinking about a better type of security tomorrow. And as always in these webinars, our subject matter is chosen and evolves from previous webinars. And today we're talking about security and the supply chain. Is full resilience restored? And in many parts of the world, there's been disruptions, most notably, of course, by COVID-19, but by other things too. And we've been hearing about this has thrown some supply chains into chaos. And what we want to know today is what are the issues? How should we start thinking about ways to get back to full resilience? So in 45 minutes, we're not trying to solve the world's problems. We're trying to instill and inspire new thinking about a traditional problem. So what I'm going to do in a second is I'm going to introduce our three panelists, all experts in different parts of the supply chain and taking different angles on it. And once I've introduced them, I will invite the three of them to make their opening statements. And once they've made their opening statements, I'll come to you, the audience, and invite you to ask any questions that you'd like to ask. And some of you have sent questions in advance. So please do use the question and answer panel on the bottom of your screen to ask your questions, and I will endeavour to get to you once everyone's spoken. So without further ado, let's meet our panellists, and let's first go to Paul in Delhi. Paul, please introduce yourself.
Hey Martin, thanks for having me on this. It's my pleasure. So I am a risk professional, and this is my bread and butter. I've been doing this for the last close to around 3 decades, and I enjoy what I'm doing. Martin, back to you.
Thank you very much indeed. And let's go from Paul over to Dipanjan. Dipanjan, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Dipanjan Mohanty, Managing Director of Himera Group. Himera is a global trading and supply chain advisory platform based out of Singapore. We are engaged into commodities and product sourcing distribution across the globe. We are integrated with our own supply chain digital platform of our own in USA. It's once again a pleasure to be with you all.
Thank you very much indeed. And now let's go to Vipul Martha. We were used to the name Martha on these webinars actually, but not this one. Vipul, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Martin. Hi folks, my name is Vipul. I lead a business, a lifestyle business in India's largest B2B e-commerce company. I'd also been into the consumer-centric businesses for past 20 years, been a CEO for organizations. Happy to be here.
Thank you very much indeed. So we bring you an expert panel. Many of you write to me and say how good our panelists are. I think you'll agree we've got another great set of expertise and insights to come today. So without further ado then, I'm now going to go to each of the panelists and I'm going to invite them to make their opening statement. 3 minutes for them to tell us what they think about this issue of supply chain security and how resilient it is. Paul, over to you. Your thoughts, please.
Thanks, Martin. So this is the way I look at it. So COVID has just administered an unwanted, unscheduled stress test on the supply chains across the world. In fact, across all organizations. And what you've seen is that organizations who were agile survived, and in fact, they have rode the way of the mayhem and thrived. So, and it's become very important and very apparent that organizational resilience has to be the DNA of the organization, and it has to be part of its culture. Another thing what is there is that the security and risk leaders have to start understanding the importance of their activities in securing and strengthening the bottom line of the organizations. And COVID has been a place where actually the risk professionals have assisted in doing this. Another thing what I like to keep saying is that the risk structures that have to be integrated with a realistic ground, response capabilities. And BCP has to be realistic. It has to be integrated into business requirements. And this has to be tailor-made for each of the organizations. I personally am of a big advocate of making a mind shift from using the word security to using the word risk, as it is a more, in my opinion, a more holistic approach. And what I see is that, especially in the South Asia context, risk practitioners in various industries, because of their unique positions or the work that they do, they keep interacting with different organizations, different government organizations, and they have been invaluable in restarting, continuing, and sustaining of supply chains. And that's been a very important part of it. And more importantly, another thing which we have understood is the importance of sticking to the basics, of sticking to the elements, of understanding vendor management, or rather the new word, that is the management of vendor ecosystem. So that's become a very important part for ensuring that your supply chain remains alive and thriving. Last but not the least is that organizations have learned or are learning to empathize with the person who is working. Like in the army, that they say, it's not the man, it's not the machine, it's the man behind the machine, which is most important. At times, it gets very frustrating, especially when you're doing this work from home or working in isolated locations. It's very important that the organization reach out to empathize with the staff who are working tirelessly. So yes, so these are some thoughts which comes to me with respect to organizational resilience. I mean, sorry, supply chain resilience and security. Martin, back to you.
Paul, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for the emphasis on the human element. I'm sure we'll come back to that in due course. Okay, don't forget, if you've got any questions, question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. I'll endeavour to get to them once we've heard from our panelists. So let's go to our second panelist then and get a second opening statement. Deepanjan, your thoughts, please.
Martin, thanks for getting me here. It's a very relevant subject for the current situations in the world. Global supply chains are getting more and more complex with uncertainties in the world. Supply chains which carried some of the identified risk earlier, like shipping, shortage, pilferage, quality, credit, currencies, etc., has got a new significant category of risk called disruptions. See, disruptions increasingly in frequency and magnitude, is getting in there. Look at COVID-19 outbreak isn't an isolated event, as for my opinion, that has caused disruptions around. There has been geopolitical events like Brexit, US-China trade war, climate-related disasters, public health crisis, which has all added to the disruptions. However, COVID-19 has been multidimensional, including its causing political mistrust and realignments. This has further brought unprecedented supply chain disruptions. Such disruptions are here to stay for long in various different forms. New commodities, product like PPE kits, sanitizers, and other safety equipments has taken center stage, further adding to the complexities and congestions on the supply chain. The newly prevalent second wave of COVID across the world has brought in further uncertainties, adding to wholesome fear, which has induced huge imbalances in supply and demand. This phenomenon is there to stay, and supply chain managers need to really think out of the box to stay out, ahead in the curve. The new challenges I see in the form of shortage of raw material, absence of workforce for manufacturing, defaults, contractual defaults due to huge swing in supply and demand, trade documentary fraud, port congestions, data security concerns. This all adds to the risk in the supply chain today. The whole business world is on a discovery mode for optimal solutions. Business operating in the space of logistics on supply chain require greater resiliency and flexibility to react to the volume fluctuations. For decades, low-cost supply and minimal inventory were the key tenets for supply chain management. However, as we move into the new reality, managing disruptions in the supply chain must stay as a key challenge of any business. I feel in this ever-changing, uncertain environment like this, it will take time till full resilience is restored. Yeah, back to you, Matt.
Deepenya, thank you very much indeed. Really, really interesting. Let's now go to our final opening statement. Just before we do, a reminder, if you want to get your questions in, using the question answer button at the bottom of your screen, I'll come to you after we've heard from our third panelist. So without further ado, let's go to Vipul. And Vipul, can we have your opening statement, please?
Yeah, thank you, Martin. Happy to be here. I'll try and bring another context, and this context is closer to India. I'm part of an e-commerce company, and we pick up 500,000 packets every day and deliver it to the retail. About 5,000 people work with us, about 2,000 trucks, about 250 hubs, about 26 warehouses. So it's a large logistics systems which works. The largest concern at this point of time, as the India is facing the second wave, is the security of people. So while we have done the social distancing, mask, sanitization, all is in place. We have put in an app where people are educated to understand this. There are video cameras which are there in the warehouses, in trucks. But the problem still remains that people are ignorant. A large amount of population thinks that COVID is not likely to hit to them. And maybe in this conversation, I would like to explore how we can bring more sensitivity. That's one. Another part is that when we talk about the supply chain, it's not one point to another, it's the ecosystem. There is a supplier, there is a buyer, and there is a logistics system in between. Any of this breaks, the supply chain breaks. And hence to be able to create consistency in supply, which means the supplier is ready to supply and the buyer is ready to buy, and holding the logistics system in between is again a key challenge. What we have been able to do is bring technology to get better forecasting, AI and ML, to have better visibility of which good is required when. But the rapidity at which the situation is changing, again, is something we have not been able to handle. So that's the second point, which maybe with panel we should discuss. The third point is the technology adoption. So adoption, which means that the deployment of technology is easy, wherein we say that there is an app, there is an MI, which tells you, so we go to an extent wherein a guy who goes to a store has a beat plan, which means he goes to store 1 at 10:30, goes to store 2 at 11:30, and so on and so forth. So while there is a technology which is available, which is got developed, which is easier to do, how do we go around enabling that technology that people use it? So in summary, I think in past 1 year, organizations like us and so many others have figured out the way to deal with it, but only partly, because in a very large ecosystems, a lot of failure comes because it is not well adopted by the people on the ground. Over to you, Martin.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, excellent. We've already got questions coming in. Do please get your questions in on the question and answer button, and we'll endeavour to come to you. But let's get started. Back to you, Paul, if I might. And a question with Ashish Melvia. I hope I pronounced that right. And the question is, what's the new normal like in the supply chain? I guess, Paul, this is to distinguish the main differences going forward to the past. So we're in a phase, Paul, where we've had to deal with the crisis. What are going to be the lasting impacts of this, if any? And after you, I'll come to Deepenya, and then I'll come to Vipul on the same question. Paul first.
Thanks, Martin. So here's my thoughts. Agility of organizations can never be emphasized more now than ever. That is the first underlying factor. Organizations which have made the change, which have understood the importance of making the change, they have survived. So this is something that I have seen at all points of time. That's the first part. And the next part is that organizations, so what is a normal? So what you've seen is that organizations have become leaner, have become more, what should I say? Organizations have started looking at building into efficiencies, have reduced overheads, and to ensure that the stuff gets delivered at the right time, in the right place, with the least amount of disruption. Initially, before this entire lockdown happened way back in 1 year ahead, people did not, people never understood, actually this is more specific for India and South Asia. We did not understand the importance of how much e-commerce had penetrated or supply chain had penetrated into our lives. And then this happened. And then we realized that they were not just a service, they became a part of something called the essential services. And they have become that. And now the way forward, what I see is that this is going to continue. People are going to be really skeptical of going out, and they're going to try and reduce going out. And how does this going out cycle get reduced? That's where the supply chain persons come in, the delivery app person happens. So that, in my way, this is going to get just going to keep on increasing. In fact, some years ago, somebody was telling me that will supply chain, I was in Amazon earlier, so the question was that will this become a sunset industry? So I said, you know what, all industries have got that growth phase of growth and sunrise and sunset and all that stuff will happen. But now this entire thing of COVID, which has happened, I really see it's going to take a long time for this industry to really take a backseat. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Interesting point. Dipanjan, let me ask you the same question. You sort of covered, you alluded to this in your opening statement, Dipanjan. This point about the difference going forward compared to what we've been used to, what the learning points, and how is it going to change, Dipanjan? Then I come to Vipul straight after.
Sure. Thanks, Martin. Well, I think, traditionally the supply chains globally has really looked at, for decades long, okay, they have looked at optimizing the optimizations have really focused on minimizing the cost, reduce inventories, and drive up the asset utilizations. I mean, that's been actually the focus earlier, right? But, this has really removed the buffers and flexibility to absorb delays and disruptions. So now what I feel is, look, I mean, as going forward, in addition to efficiency, effectiveness, and experience, okay, there has to be, the management of the supply chain on the flexibility is the most important thing that is going to actually emerge. That's one. The second point is, in the current environment, I have been observing, as we are there as one of the global player in the supply chain doing commodities and product, I've seen the situations of COVID-like situations have come in like a force majeure. And there has been cases where the suppliers have used force majeure to their benefit. And in fact, is indirectly, I call that as defaults being called as like a force majeure. So the risk perception has gone up to that extent. And we are also seeing that, in even those dispute settlement on the international courts, arbitration center, I do see the effectiveness has gone down a bit on the current situation. May not have really gone down to the extent of is efficiency, but the effectiveness I'm talking, in the sense delays in the process due to lockdowns. And so that has created a lot of doubts and fear among supply chain players like us. So yes, going forward, my basic 2 points would be bringing flexibility, forgetting the traditional way of covering the cost, looking at a wholesome picture, being very careful about the risk, contractual risk and the default risk in the supply system. Over to you, Matty.
Yeah, thank you. Interested again. I'm going to bring you in as well on this, because it strikes me as really quite a good question about the long-term impacts of this. You started off talking about humans. Is this human factor going to crop in here about workers? Your thoughts, Vipul?
Oh, thank you, Martin. I think 2 points. The question is that what would be the new normal? I think there will be no normal. So much unpredictability, which will remain now and forever, that the life has changed. Dipanjan and Paul talked about agility, efficiency, and I have 2 points here. One is the usage of technology in all of this. So to give you an example, so when we pick up goods and we deliver it to from a manufacturer and we deliver it to a retailer, and hence in this whole pipeline, we have to envisage as what is likely to be the demand at the end of it. So if the demand is reducing, then our algorithms works and tell us where to stop the good. Should we stop it at the supplier place? Should we stop it at the first hub? Should we stop it at the central warehouse, or shall we stop it at the hubs which are closer to the delivery? Depending upon the rate of sale, the whole pipeline gets changed. So technology eventually creates a larger, play as far as the efficiency. So that's point number one. Point number two is that in this whole supply chain, it's a pipe. And if the pipe has a slower flow, which means that there's slower velocity of money flowing into the supply. Obviously, there's a slower flow of the goods. So the money is drying up in the whole. So there is lesser money available with the buyer, lesser money available with the logistics, and lesser money available with the supplier. So as the money dries up, it will be very important that people find ways to keep the working capital on, and the people who have the money will survive. In India, the situation is very, very clear. Very large distribution systems have got disrupted because people have run out of money. The credit cycles have become so long, and then the business has come to a stop. So two parts. One is people will have to go to a better technology for better forecasting. Two, they will have to find ways to raise money and keep the business going. And the mute point is there is no normal. I mean, life is changing so fast. It may change in another couple of months. Back to you, Martin.
Thank you very much. Let me just come to you with the next question, Vipul, because it builds on what you've just said. And it's from Dennis Shep, who's a former panelist based in Canada, Vipul. And he says, has the pandemic led to more focus on replacing humans with robotics and technology? And I guess the point is you've pointed to a very good example where it's all work for the better. We've heard on other webinars, though, that technology is not an unqualified good. I just wonder where each of you think this issue of technology and robotics and is going to go going forward. I mean, is this the solution to our problems? And Dipanjan, I'll come to you straight afterwards because you've also mentioned this. Vipul, for you first.
Okay, thanks, Martin. In my view, there is robotics and there is intelligence, and they are two different things. Robotics is when we replace human by doing things mechanically, which we don't want humans to do, and create an efficiency around it. And the intelligence is the second part, that we use data in a manner that the whole supply chain becomes more efficient. So the question is that, is robotics going to replace humans? Obviously, yes, over a period of time they should, but especially in case of India, the labor is cheap and there is a need for us to generate employment. It's not going to happen that fast. What can happen fast and what can happen immediately is to be able to create intelligence, and intelligence around how to do the same work in a more efficient manner through technology, visibility, data, AI, and all of that put together, so that with least friction, with least amount of time, effort, and money deployed, outcomes are created. So I'm just splitting it into two parts, robotics and intelligence. Robotics is going to take time, at least in India. Intelligence should happen now.
Thank you very much indeed. Dipanjan, I'm going to come to you. So the question is about the extent to which humans will be replaced by robotics stroke technology, and whether this is a good thing or not. And once you've come, I'll come to you, Paul. So Dipanjan, your comments next, please.
I pretty much agree with Vipul. I mean, he just differentiated the robotics and intelligence, which, what we have really seen in the supply chain, specific to supply chain, is in a robotics, not alone in India, but globally, is quite a bit of time that it could actually replace human being. Because, let's take an example of a coal supply chain, coming from a mines in Indonesia, going to India, or for that matter, going to China to a steel plant. So there are physical issues which it would really take time for a robot to actually replace human being there. And, it has to be physically shipped. I'm talking a large commodity space, which we are in actually there. Now, intelligence has been prevalent in some form or other in the past. For example, in my previous organization, which used to be a global multinational trading house, one of the largest, we used to have intelligence actually done in a very physical manner. I'm saying it's like 20 years back, which used to be, there would be like a core global center, and every, branch places, like we were present in around 90 different countries, and each country would have probably 20 different offices, and each office would have a person through a fax. I mean, that time those WhatsApp or smartphones were not prevalent, and through a fax would be actually keeping the global center informed. So a global intelligence about a supply and demand, okay, used to be actually created not from likes of Reuters or Bloomberg. It to be created physically by the people who are present in that, of that company across the world. So I've been through that kind of intelligence which are collected from the ground. Now, if you look at intelligence which has come in a digitized form, okay, you talk at blockchain technology, which has actually come up, where you actually can track down your supplier. You can go 3 stages behind, and then you can actually evaluate what kind of supply chain you are actually sitting on, what kind of disruptions that can be created. If your supplier's supply has a labor strike, or that a COVID has affected the workforce there, how your supply is going to be affected. So this digitalized intelligence, blockchain technology, which has come up, actually is very useful on the technology, welcoming the technology to the supply chain. And yes, intelligence is being captured through this kind of technology, but robotic is it's going to take quite a time to replace human being. Yeah, over to you, Martin.
There might be many people around the world who say, thank goodness. Paul, let me come to you and build on this. And a question from Rajiv, who helped me put this together, Rajiv Martha, actually. And Rajiv is got a question which says, in managing an international supply chain, is managing an international supply chain more difficult compared to a domestic chain because of the unknown uncertainties? Or does it really not make any difference? Good question. I mean, I guess the logic would be the more you add countries, the more you add cultures and systems, the more you add complexity. Is that right?
Oh, totally, man, totally. Martin, this is the more countries, but you know what, let's just take a step back. If you look at India, India is like almost like the European Union. We've got so many states which have got all disparate ways of doing stuff and the ways of doing understanding. In fact, the head nod, the famous head nod of India, in the northern part of the country, it's something else. In the southern part of the country, something else. So I'm just talking of India. So about the minute you add more countries, obviously it's going to be difficult. It's going to be different. You're going to be wading through different rules, different guidelines, different compliance issues. So that's very important to understand. Otherwise, you're going to keep getting stuff. There are a lot of items which are no-go in certain countries. Like, for example, in Southeastern Asian countries, liquor in some places is a no-go. So that has to be kept in mind before you even start doing that. It's very important to understand the rules, regulations before we start off doing that. So yes, to answer your question, yes, it is. But in India itself, even within the country, we have our own difficulties because certain states act in a different way with respect to carriage of certain items. So yes, it is difficult.
Okay, Vipul, just a quick comment from you on this. I mean, I'm just interested in this, the things that make it complex in a supply chain. I mean, it's, in some ways, not many of us will need convincing that it's complex. And I suppose it's complex because there's lots of countries, because there's lots of suppliers, because there's lots of products. My sense is that if you've got a system that's good at that, surely it would be good across the world. I'm just trying to get an understanding of what makes it difficult. What are there key things that stand out as we must manage this in order for it to be better? Vipul first, and a quick comment from Deepanjan.
Okay, so I will have a more Indian context, and I'll let Deepan bring the international context. He's expert in that. In an Indian context, the supply chain further becomes complex if the goods are perishable. If the goods have to reach at a specific period of time because there is a festivity or there is an occasion. So if there is a Sunday or if there is a Diwali, which is one of the festival here. So there is a timeliness, there is a perishability of it. And also there is a difference in which people understand language. So when we started our app, which interacts with people, it was in English. And a very large number of people in India does not know English. So we went Hindi, which is the second largest language. Then we went vernacular. And hence all the communication medium has to break into multiple languages because in such a large country like India, the languages are different. Also the way people treat logistics and their importance. So let's say a truck driver is asked that you must reach from place A to place B in 4 days time. Until there is incentive systems which are very clear to him, he may take 6 days time, and then it completely derails the whole. So just in time as a process, which is linked with commercial, which is linked with people, could be another aspect. So to summarize, I think perishability of goods, language differences, large distances, volumetric and the weight combination as how much you can stack in one truck, ability to store different kind of materials into different trucks. So let's say now in India, the government regulation is you can supply essentials, but you cannot supply fabrics or the garments. Now, in our company, we have food, FMCG, pharma, apparel, and all of this. Now, the problem is that the trucks is going half empty because what they used to carry apparel. Now they're just carrying pharma and food. So the whole thing has completely disrupted. Now we'll have to move to smaller trucks to enable those deliveries. So these are some of the complexities which India is observing. I'll let Dipayan comment on the international one.
Yeah, okay. Interesting points, though. Dipayan, perhaps you could build on that for us. That's a good context.
Sure. I mean, it's really a very relevant context. I mean, I would have you, probably I will sound a bit controversial here, but I do see that, you know, on an international market, there are vindictiveness. There are, you know, situational inter-country, you know, there could be an event on the political side that has affected on the commercial side. Giving an example here, let's say China used to buy a lot of coking coal from Australia, and Australia has been one of the major source of coking coal. But you know, the current situation where the relationship between China and Australia, which is whether out of COVID, whether out of China's own policies, it has got deteriorated. And so, you know, the supply of coking coal to the Chinese steel plants have been affected. And then they have looked for the alternate suppliers. And then what has emerged is China, who supplies, say, hot rolled coils to the whole world, the prices have gone up to that extent because their import cost has gone up. So you see today that on the supply chain, this multicultural, you know, I mean, there are differentiation of a ship which is based on the flag it carries. You know, there are trust issues across. We saw the US and China trade war, which is, you know, has come up, and they have kind of a India-China difference on, you know, the trades as is happening. So it's both opportunity, rivalry, mistrust, realignment of the countries that has caused a different supply chain challenge today. I mean, my personal feel is the commodity prices which we see globally has gone up. This is one of the reason of global differences of countries which has given rise to the commodity prices going up. Second point is, when we talk multicultural, multi-country supply chain, we have added risk of currency, the regulatory environment, the tax environment. You know, even if WTO tries to intervene there and tries to normalize the process of taxes, but never really plays that way. You know, there are, you know, countries who would actually go on a protectionism, and especially in such kind of situations of COVID, that has really come up much more relevant. So yeah, the complexity of global trade on this situation has become even further complex, and the risk, I would rather say that supply chain is continuing, the commodity trades are happening, purchases are going on, the risk perception has gone up, and that's where the the supply chain managers need to be really thinking out of the box to manage their risk. Over to you, Martin.
Thank you very much indeed. Got a really interesting question, Paul. I'm going to come to you first. It's from the questions from another Paul Williamson. And he raises a really good question. I'll tell you why I think it's a good question, because the next webinar next Tuesday is about the value of accreditations and whether they mean something or not. And Paul's question to you, Paul, first, if I might, is that will a supply chain qualification be needed going forward? Perhaps a prerequisite, not just to show that you've got supply chain resilience in a security or risk sense, but that it takes on the added dimension of being protected the workers and the goods through this whole COVID nightmare. Is there now a need, and will there be more credibility to some sort of accreditation process or some sort of qualification process or certification process? Paul, then Vipul, I'll come to you afterwards. Paul first.
Thanks. So there are certifications which are going around. There are organizations who have got their own certifications, and so there are organizations which are agnostic. There are certifications which are agnostic of organizations too. There are, I know of organizations which look for certified supply chain vendors so that their supply chain is assured in times of a crisis. That means their BCP is taken care of. That means their entire points of the touch points are stress tested to ensure that in case of an issue, they have got it will not become a bottleneck and it will get addressed. So yes, so this is something which is going to gather more interest, which is going to gather more, what should I say, focus on. And we're going to have organizations which will be wanting that if I'm going to do business with you, you must be having this sort of certification. TAPA is one of them which I know of, which I've done. So yes, so that is something which is going to happen. And this is not in any selfish way. This is just that the organization, the base organization wants to safeguard themselves from any such issues. So those are my thoughts, Martin.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you very much indeed. Vipul, do you agree? I mean, that people are going to put a greater focus on this going forward. Is that your thoughts?
Martin, if I've understood the question right, the question is that in this current scenario, does the certification help? Is that the right question?
Yes. And will the certifications need to be different to what they've been in the past? And are they going to be more in demand as a consequence of all the worries that have gone on in this crisis?
Okay, so I have a little different point of view and a paradoxical point of view. I would rather challenge, why certification? I mean, what will it do to you? Certification is evidence of knowing something which was right in past. The speed at which the world is changing and the newer supply requirements are coming up, I'm not too sure whether certification is the path. I think if we have to educate our people and become more efficient in generating the current supply chain, we should actually take them and make them do technology programs, and not a certification program which is around, let's say, the traditional certification programs. So let's say, knowing the technology which is coming up, able to understand and leverage it the best. So let's say, if I have a choice, I will first go to a technology partner, ask them and train my people, saying that if this is a technology, everybody in my system should be able to deal and execute the technology with 100%. I would not emphasize much on my reportees or my system going after certifications. I would rather go after learning, and learning which is coming from technology partners.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, that was a question for Paul Williamson. Deepanjan, let me come to you because on this, and Mike Gibbs has had a question about the vaccine supply chain and all the problems that, you know, keeping it cold and getting it around the world. And Deepanjan, I guess the point is, wouldn't accreditation or certification become even more important when you're dealing with something like that, which is so fundamental to life? Depending on, what's your take on this?
Well, I mean, when the supply chain is related to human life, okay, which is very different than a supply chain that could be to apparels or to a coal going to a steel plant. The margin of error for a supply that is happening for a human life uh, is very less. Okay, I mean, it's you cannot afford to take any chance. So you referred to, Martin, I guess, about vaccines and say PPE kits and all, which actually deals on the healthcare and human life. So I would say that yes, the certifications, though I do agree with Vipul to extent that sometimes the certifications are specifically in certain areas are a piece of paper rather than someone should look at doing like a concept as people talk about TCO, like total cost ownership of the suppliers, evaluating your partners, etc. Those fundamental concepts can be applied. But coming back to vaccine, when you're talking about human life, I think the certifications is a very important part, along with the other factors that you should be evaluating.
But I mean, and do you think that the concern about protecting vaccines themselves is going to fuel interest in this area? Or is this just going to pass quickly? I just wonder whether it's the crisis generally or the protection of the vaccine that itself. And I guess that's behind Michael Gibbs' question.
Sure, Martin, my view, you're asking me, Martin?
Yes, please. Just
Sure.
following up on your final point.
Sure. I mean, my view on this COVID pandemic vaccines, of course, I feel in some form or other is going to stay. Okay. And if you look at protecting the vaccine in form of the manner, let's say sub-zero temperature and all those things which is prescribed, certifications are going to stay. Certifications are going to be much more complex, going to be much more, detailed. And the phenomena is going to stay for years to come in different forms.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Well, look, we're coming to the end. I'm going to ask you each one question, and it's a difficult question, and you've only got 20 seconds each to answer it. Now, how unfair is that on a panelist? But we do it a lot of weeks, actually. We're running out of time, and I just want to make sure I get you on this. Headline strategic issue. What is the major concern that we need to think about moving forward? And Keith Nielsen's asked a question about what the new normal will be. But what's the key issue we're going to have to think about in terms of building in resilience? Where should we go? What's the headline strategic thinking issue we should most worry about? You've only got 20 seconds. Very quickly, Paul, you first.
People. I will go for people. So people is the most important thing. So they are the persons who have got to be trained, retrained, relearn, unlearn the entire thing. So unless until your people are not trained and understand the requirement of change, all those processes will just come to zilch.
Vipul, coming to you next. You don't agree with that, do you? You think it's technology?
No, I think it's people again. It's just that the safety of people, I'll bring another perspective. Because if the people get ill, the whole supply chain disrupts, which is the warehouses get closed, the quarantine happens. So enabling people to understand what is right, making them do it, and training them to adopt technology is something which will, in my view, build resilience. Okay,
thank you very much. Let's hear the last comment to you, Deepanya. Just 20 seconds. Your thoughts, headline issue.
Sure, I do understand people are important, but the reality on ground is people may not be available to do what you want them to do, because this pandemic kind of situation is going to continue. So technology to me is very, very critical. We have to have technology which can potentially work around people, facilitate what people were physically trying to do. So my feel will be about technology and transparency that technology can create in the supply chain.
Thank you very much indeed, panelists. That was an exceptional discussion. We could have gone, and we will another day, I'm sure. Some excellent issues there, actually. And don't forget, a copy of this webinar will be on the website tomorrow. So will a blog that I will be writing up. I take notes as people speak. A few final comments from me, very, very quickly, if I might, just to say we've got a study going on at the moment about the security officers and what they think about their role. It's taking place in lots of different countries. You can see them, including India. So India, please get your security officers to complete this survey. We'll send you the links in the follow-up to this webinar. Also to say the OSPAs are currently open in Kenya, Romania, and the United States. They're going to open in other countries soon, to look out. And the Tackling Economic Crime Awards for the UK, open already, closes in August, but get them in early. Next thing to say is on Monday, we're going to open entries for the first ever cyber OSPAs. The leading associations in the world are taking part. If you know an association's not there, do them to engage with us. A worldwide OSPA's taking place. Entries open on Monday. How exciting is that? And finally, to say that we're going to be going through it all over again on Tuesday, when our webinar will be the benefits and pitfalls of security accreditations. Do they serve security professionals well? How ironic it came up today. It just shows we're on the right wavelength. So thank you very much indeed to my panelists once again. Thank you indeed to the audience for your questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to all the questions, but that's a good sign, I do. Thank you in the background to Christine Brooks and Hannah Miller. And I hopefully to all of you will see you again soon. I'd like to think it'll be Tuesday at the same time. But until then, wherever you are in the world, stay safe.